And grace and peace to everybody viewing Bible Christians on YouTube. What we're going to deal with today is where is Enoch? Where is Enoch? We just did a lesson recently explaining that the dead are still in the grave. Well, when we did that lesson, people responded and asked, well, where is Enoch? Well, what's we're going to deal with today? The title is Where is Enoch? We're going to start off in Genesis chapter 5. We're going to explain this lesson exactly where Enoch is. Genesis chapter 5, we're going to read verses 23 and 24. When you get there, go ahead.
And all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him.
Now, here it says, Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Now, it doesn't say where God took him. We just assume that it's heaven because of the tradition and the doctrine that we're taught in traditional churches. But this scripture does not say where did God take him. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11, we're going to read one verse here. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 5. Now, we just can't assume that because it said God took him, that he took him up to the third heaven where he is. Jesus told us in St. John chapter 3, verse 13, that no man has ascended up to heaven, but he that came down from heaven. So, we know that Jesus did not lie. So, it's safe to say that Enoch is definitely not in heaven. Right. Just because Jesus said so. And being that all the word of God is true, we know that Jesus didn't lie. So, he's not up there with the Father and with Jesus at his right hand and with the angels. No man is sitting up there. Let's go to Hebrews 11 and read verse 5. When you get there, go ahead.
By faith Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found because God had translated him.
Now, this is what happened. It said it was not found because God has translated him. Translated him to what? We're going to find that out. Go ahead.
For before his translation he had his testimony that he pleased God.
Now it says, by faith Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found because God had translated him. Now let's see what happens when you are translated. Go to 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Because first thing we need to understand, there's two forms of body. You have the natural body, the body we all working around, the terrestrial body, the body that we all are born into and turn into dust. Then you have the celestial body or the spiritual body, the body that we will receive at the resurrection. That's the body that lives forever. You have the terrestrial body that's going on right now. Then you have the celestial body that we all hope to achieve, that we can go into the kingdom with. So let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 20. When you get there, go ahead.
But now is Christ risen from the dead and become the first fruits of them that slept.
All right, now Christ is our example because Christ is the example of somebody who died when it was in the grave and was resurrected in that spiritual body, in that celestial body. Because Christ was in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights and then he was resurrected. But notice one thing. When they went to the tomb, did they see anything, brother? Mm-mm. They didn't see anything. That's what happens when you're going to go to the kingdom. Because some people say they go to a funeral, they see the body and say that's just a shell, the spirit going up to heaven. Well, we cleared what spirit that was up in another lesson. But even still, we see the body. So, if the body really was changed and going to the kingdom, then you wouldn't see nobody in front of you. Just like when they went to the tomb, they didn't see nobody when Jesus was there. Exactly. But that's another lesson. So, Christ became the example, the first fruits of them that were dead, and he got his new body, and that's the example, because God can't do nothing new. Jump down to verse 51 and go ahead.
Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall be changed. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. So when this corruptible shall have put on incorruption, and this mortal shall have put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory.
So that's what happened to Enoch. When Enoch was translated, he put on immortality. Or he has that spiritual body. He has that glorious body that we all hope to achieve. But he never seen death. That's the difference. Jesus seen death. That's why Jesus is the first fruits of them that slept. Enoch never slept. So when God translated him, he was changed into that spiritual body that lives for all eternity. But he wasn't taken up to the third heaven. Let's go to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. And we're going to read verses 13 through 17. Now, some people say that this is a rapture, but this is just referring to the first resurrection. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 through 17. When you get there, go ahead.
But I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep.
Them who are asleep are those that are dead, but go ahead.
That ye sorrow not, even as others which have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so them also which sleep in Jesus will God bring with him. For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord shall not prevent them which are asleep. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first.
All right, so remember it said the Lord shall descend, meaning he is on his way from the third heaven, descending. Then he's going to blow the trumpet, and the dead is going to get resurrected. But they're going to be in the grave until this happens. So as long as that trumpet has not been blown, the dead is in the grave waiting for this moment. But verse 17.
Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air.
Now notice here it says, then which we are alive and remain until his coming shall be caught up to the clouds together to meet the Lord in the air. Now those that are alive at this time never tasted death. Meaning they never died. Now Jesus was an example of those who died and came out the grave, just like he did. He was the first fruits. But Enoch is our example of those who never tasted death and was translated. Because these who are alive are going to meet the Lord in the air and they're going to be translated. But keep in mind, Jesus is on his way down. And we're going to meet the Lord in the air. And they're going to meet him in the air. They're going to get translated just like Enoch was translated. And they're going to be forever with the Lord. Go to Matthew chapter 24. And we're going to start at verse 29. Matthew chapter 24, and we're going to start at verse 29. When you get there, go ahead.
Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken.
So has this happened yet, brother?
No, it's not happened.
So this is future. This is the second coming of Christ. The second coming of Christ after tribulation, but verse 30.
And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn. And they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory.
So just like we read in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, he's going to come in the clouds. He descended in the clouds. This is the same event. And guess what? We're going to hear about a trumpet too. Verse 31.
And he shall send his angels with the great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other.
And there go that trumpet. Now remember, it was the first resurrection in Thessalonians. This is the same time. And let's see what shall happen. Verse 40. Then
shall two be in the field, and the one taken, and the other left.
Just like Enoch was taken and never tasted death, even here, at this first resurrection, when the trumpet is blown, those which remain alive to the coming shall be taken also, meet the Lord in the air. Then shall one be taken, just like Enoch was taken, and the other left. Verse 41.
Two women shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken, and the other left.
Now remember, they're going to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall they ever be with the Lord. Let's see where they're coming, because the Lord is descending, they're coming up. Now Enoch is coming up right along with them. He still has been in the heaven. He's been on this earth this entire time, waiting for this event to happen. Why? Because he's not in the third heaven, because Jesus told us no man ascended to heaven but he that came down from heaven. So let's see where they're going. Now remember, when in Acts chapter 1, the angel told his disciples Jesus is going to come back in the same manner which he left. Let's see if that happens. Zechariah 14, and read verse 1. When you get there, go ahead. Zechariah chapter 14. We're going to read verse 1. Let's see when Jesus is descending, where he's on his way down to. When you get there, go ahead.
Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, and thy spoils shall be divided in the midst of thee. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city.
Verse 3.
Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations, as when he fought in the day of battle.
This hasn't happened yet. This is future. Verse 4.
And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof toward the east, toward the west.
And that's where he's on his way down to Mount Olives. Jump down to verse 5 and go ahead.
And ye shall flee to the valley of the mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach unto Azal. Yea, ye shall flee like as ye fled from before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. And the Lord my God shall come, and all the saints with thee.
So all the saints will come at this time. Enoch is on the earth waiting for this event, and that's where he is unto this day. Hope you guys